called hope is. It's any place Hillary isn't. Democrats finally won a presidential election 12 years after Clinton last won a presidential election, and they're proclaiming the end of the Republican Party. But I don't think I'd be hanging the mission accomplished sign up just yet. Obama had the mainstream media, the European Union, and Oprah on his side. In fact, in a poll of Germans shortly before the elections, they supported Obama by 80% over McCain. And we all know how infallible the Germans are at picking great leaders. Meanwhile, the Republicans were running John McCain. It's amazing McCain lost by only 7 points instead of 75. Obama beating McCain is the equivalent of George Foreman beating Helen Thomas in a technical knockout in the 12th round. Which, come to think of it, I pay good money to see. I just hope Republicans aren't this insufferable every time we win an election. I note that the last time liberals were so cocksure of their eternal dominance was in 1964 when Lyndon Johnson won a landslide election against Barry Goldwater. You think Obama winning 28 states is impressive? LBJ won 44. To review Lyndon Baines Johnson's accomplishments, he started the war on poverty 4 decades ago, and we're still waiting for an exit strategy on that quagmire. Hey, liberals, how exactly would you define victory in the war on poverty? I only ask because you consider that such a showstopper of a question in the war in Iraq. President Johnson escalated the war in Vietnam to prove that Democrats could be trusted on national security, that they could fight too. So 58,000 Americans died so that Democrats could prove that they could be trusted with national security. No wonder the term Johnson-esque never really caught on, I mean, except in the adult film industry. It's interesting that Obama's admirers in the press compare him to Lincoln and Reagan. Apparently they can't find a Democrat president worthy of being compared to. That 1964 election for LBJ, the landslide, was not only the Democrats' last high water mark in a presidential election, it was virtually the last mark Democrats left on American history. That's if you don't count stains. Between LBJ's landslide election in 1964 and Obama's victory this past November, Democrats have been able to trick a majority of Americans into voting for them only one other time, in 1976, when Jimmy Carter won with 50.1% of the vote. But think of that. Even following Nixon, even after Watergate, even running against an unelected president, Gerald Ford, the Democrats could only get 50.1% of the vote. That's almost as pathetic as only getting 53% of the vote against John McCain. And Carter's reputation has certainly gone up with time. Carter became the template for what a bad president is. The Carter presidency is like a Grimm's fairy tale by now. Even people who weren't born then know about the horror and the tragedy of the Carter years. You will notice that Republican presidents' reputations always go up in history, Democratic presidents' reputations always go down. So to summarize, until last November, the last time the Democrats tricked a majority of Americans for voting for them, lime green leisure suits were in. So I think plans to add Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid to Mount Rushmore should be put on hold until further notice. To put that another way, and in the media may see Obama as the second coming, but given his policies so far, I think there won't be a second.
I've never heard this, that embryonic stem cells are useless and a fraud. It seems to me, everything I've always read was that the scientific community was anxious to get embryonic stem cells because, of course, these are stem cells that are so primitive. It's such a microscopic piece of goo that's plainly not a human. That they have yet to become any sort of cell. They're like freshmen who haven't declared a major. So they're very valuable. They could become something to have Parkinson's, or they could Alzheimer's. That's why all these different groups are anxious to have this stem cell, embryonic stem cell research. And also, most of them are made in a lab. They're from people who don't finish their eggs. Instead of throwing those away, we'd like to use them to, help people.
In point of fact, in South Korea and Portugal, and you can all look this up very easily in my book, heavily footnoted on stem cell research. I can't say anything. You can say anything I say. I'm making up. I'm not making it up.
I'm a good debater.
Adult stem cell research for skin grafts directly from the hand graft. They now can get from adult stem cells. What was unique about embryonic stem cells, well, for one thing, it wasn't actual scientists doing the research. I'll win you over on this point, Bill. The embryonic stem cell researchers aren't researchers at all. They're female biologists. They're the ones who fainted when Larry Summers said there might be a difference in the way men and women can do science. It's a completely different category. Lots of private money and angel investors is going to be claiming it's doing things for the poor and the disadvantaged. The more the finaglers and the con men can figure out how to work the system, and when the government, as part of the stimulus bill, is spending billions of dollars to refurbish docks near where Nancy Pelosi's, husband has all these rental properties, it's always the finaglers who get in, and I'm coming around to support you. And that is, I think, on your point with the recessed lighting, that's exactly what happened. Barney Frank and Chris Dodd pushed Fannie Mae to force the banks to give loans, to drop all business judgment, give a loan to somebody using unemployment benefits as collateral, put no money down. They're thinking we're doing it for the poor, but who took advantage of it? I say it was yuppie scum house flippers, and part of the reason for saying that is, who cares about the house flippers? We always hear about, the poor, we want to keep them in their homes. No, I don't think that's who is the victims here. Because look at the big states that have been hit by it. Florida, Nevada, and California. You don't think of those states as, lots of poor people. You think of them as places where people are buying and selling real estate. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac forcing the banks to give these loans to people who should never have been given a loan.
No, it wasn't.
It comes back, they're saying we're going to push and you can go back and look in 1998, 1999, with the Democrats pushing that Fannie Mae, and a few Republicans, but mostly Democrats, and mostly Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, and Republicans screaming from the rooftops, this is going to be another S&L crisis.
Yes, and Chuck Schumer with the hedge funds.
And
Bill Clinton signed Glass-Steagall. So I agree. The Democrats are not blameless.
All right, there may be too much agreement in this area, so we're going to move on. I don't think everybody...
But she'll never do the reverse. She'll never blame anything on the Republicans.
No, that's not true.
We'll see. This is from the jump ball category. Either of you can come in here on this one. Sarah Palin, 2012. What are the chances of that happening? Sarah Palin, the Republican nominee in about 4 years.
I love Sarah Palin. She was the one I voted for. She's very young. We also have to grade her on a curve. She's got the 8 kids, or however many there are. I tell her, go back to Alaska, be a good governor, raise your kids so they don't turn out like Ron Reagan Jr., and then run in 8, 12 years. But I have to say, looking around, I don't see that many candidates for the Republicans. She has everything. She spent a few years reading a lot. You can't get from book learning. She was very impressive.
When you're 44, you need to do a lot of learning.
You and I could not have answered a lot of those boring questions. Unfortunately, we don't have to know about everything. Please don't ask us about everything.
44 was our heyday.
Boring questions like what newspapers do you read? Boring questions like that.
The newspapers, do you read questions? I would defend her on. I don't like answering questions like that. What's on your TiVo? What books do you read? And I'm not running for president. If you're running for president, you're thinking, if I say the New York Times, will it sound like I'm an elitist? If I say, the Bunny Chip Gazette, will it sound like... So all these